What is the heart of the Buddha? In Jodo Shinshu, the only Buddha we have, quote, faith in and worship is Amida, the Buddha of limitless wisdom and compassion. When we are bathed in the light of limitless wisdom, the state or condition of our heart, as described in the previous segments of this video series, becomes clear, which really means that right now, Amida Buddha's rays of wisdom are shining on us. If the blind fish of Carlsbad Caverns are exposed to light for as long as they have been deprived of it, their atrophied eyes will again begin to function, and they will be able to see. Similarly, only through continuous exposure to the light of limitless wisdom will the atrophied eyes of our heart begin to open up. When Amida Buddha calls us, he does so by name. The name he calls us by is, quote, evil and ignorant being full of base desires. He cannot call us using the term, quote, good person. In response to Amida's calling, unless we say, he is referring to me, we will not understand his teaching. We will think he is referring to someone else, and his teaching will pass over our head. But our egotistically colored glasses make it difficult for us to accept this form of reference to ourselves. Shinjin, the mind of faith, is nodding our head in agreement to Amida Buddha's calling. We are then relieved of making any effort to bring about our own enlightenment, resulting in peace of mind. The term mind of faith is often misunderstood. We may resolve to ourselves, all right, I will have faith, and feel that making this effort will result in the mind of faith. But this sort of faith is only a hardening of our ego and is just another name for stubbornness. Since it was a bamboo, an unenlightened person, who made the resolve to, quote, have faith, that, quote, faith may be broken very easily. Then we will say, I went out of my way to have faith, but nothing happened. Faith in the Nembutsu is not like faith, which is a hardening of the ego. Rather, it is a breaking up of the ego by the strength of wisdom which is limitless, and a path which we can follow to continually grow. What does it mean to be, quote, evil? A fencing master was once asked, quote, if I study fencing for 2 hours every day, how long will it take me to become an expert? The master's reply was, it will take 5 years. If I study for 4 hours a day, the questioner continued, then how long will it take? The master's reply was, it will take 10 years. But if I practiced as hard as I could for 8 hours every day, the questioner persisted, then how long will it take? In that case, replied the master, it will take a lifetime. This story seems contrary to reason, but in this story is the essence of the Jodo Shinshu teachings. During his lifetime, Shinran Shonin was looked upon by his disciples as being a saint. There is a record of his direct disciple, Renni, having said that Shinran Shonin was the incarnation of a bodhisattva. This is how Shinran was evaluated by others. But how did Shinran evaluate himself? In a poem written when he was over 80 years of age, Shinran Shonin wrote, quote, though I rely on the true teachings of the Pure Land, the true mind is difficult to acquire. I have an ignorant and insincere body, and am absolutely without a pure mind. Can there be a greater difference in how the same person was evaluated? His disciples considered him to be a saint. He considered himself to be a hypocrite. It is impossible to reconcile these two attitudes unless we understand the standards that Shinran Shonin set for himself. The fencing master considered that a person who was willing to spend only 2 hours a day in practice would not have very high standards, and could thus easily convince himself that he was an expert in only 5 years. If the student was interested enough to practice 4 hours a day, however, his standards would be undoubtedly much higher, and at least 10 years would be required before he would be satisfied. But if the student was earnest enough to practice 8 hours a day, he would never be content with his fencing ability, even if he won all the tournaments he entered. Similarly, because Shinran Shonen's conduct exceeded the standards Renyi had set, Shinran Shonen was a saint. But Shinran Shonen's conduct was far below the standards he set for himself. And the more Shinran Shonen approached his already high standards, the higher he saw that they could be set. Although people looking at Shinran Shonen could see him growing morally and spiritually, he himself felt that in comparison with his constantly rising standards, which always rose faster than his attainments, he was falling behind, and thus his sense of, quote, evil, his consciousness of imperfection, increased. The reason we do not sense our, quote, evil nature as strongly as Shinran Shonen did is that we are not as severe with ourselves as he was. The more severe we are with ourselves, the greater will be our sense of imperfection, or, quote, evil. The sense of evil, or, quote, sin, in Jodo Shinshu is quite different from sin in Christianity. According to Christian dogma, man is born in sin. In Jodo Shinshu, however, this sense of imperfection, or, quote, evil, develops only when we strive to improve ourselves. Religious practice. What do you do if you wish to become a good baseball player? You practice baseball. And if you wish to become a good basketball or football player, you must practice those games. In order to do anything well, you must practice. But what do you practice in order to become enlightened? In Buddha Dharma, the word used to refer to religious practice which results in enlightenment is shugyo. The shugyo of the Zen school of Buddha Dharma is meditation or zazen. The Shingon school emphasizes, quote, finger movements or mudras as the way to follow in attaining enlightenment. The shugyo for the Nichiren schools is to recite the sacred title, the Daimoku, which is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. In that school, it is felt that the more often and earnestly you chant the Daimoku, the more material benefits you will receive. What is the position of Jodo Shinshu regarding shugyo? Jodo Shinshu is unique among all Buddhist schools in that, from a doctrinal point of view, there is no shugyo to perform, for all shugyo is contained in the name Namu Amida Butsu. Not only all shugyo, but all good and all benefits are contained in it. The number of times you recite Namu Amida Butsu has no bearing on your birth in the Pure Land. Jodo Shinshu is a teaching for lay people. It is not a teaching for monks. In order to become a monk, you must give up all your possessions, leave home, and spend your entire time and effort in the cultivation of enlightenment. Is this possible for everyone? And even if it were possible for everyone to leave home, would all have the willpower to complete the rigorous religious practice that is required? Shinran Shonen became a Tendai Buddhist monk in the year 1181. Although no one is absolutely sure of what he did as a monk, there is very little doubt as to the kind of shugyo Shinran Shonen underwent. For the Tendai monks of today are very proud of the fact that the religious practice they engage in is exactly the same as that first practiced by the founder of the Tendai school in Japan. Shocho Hagami is a modern Buddhist monk of the Tendai school who underwent the very rigorous Kaihogyo shugyo. The Kaihogyo literally means a round peak practice and consists of making 1,000 circuits around the peak of Mount Hai. During the first several years of his Shugyo, monk Hagami walked about 20 miles a day over very rough terrain with many natural obstacles. During the last few years, he walked over 50 miles every day. This was in addition to the normal routine every monk followed. After the circuit was made 700 times, monk Hagami went through a special Shugyo within the Kaigyo Shugyo. This special Shugyo lasted 9 days. During this time, monk Hagami could not eat any food, sleep lying down, he was allowed to rest while sitting in a chair, or drink any water. Not only did he have to forego any water during this period, he had to draw water from a well and carry it to the monastery for the other monks to drink. But that was not all. After fasting, going without sleep and water for 9 days, monk Hagami participated in what is called a Goma ceremony. A fire was made, and monk Hagami ceremoniously placed sticks of wood about a half-inch thick and about a foot long into the fire. The sticks of wood symbolized the, quote, evil in himself to be consumed by the fire. The Goma ceremony was held in the dead of winter, in an area without central heating. Monk Hagami was required to burn no less than 120,000 pieces of wood. The stack of wood was over 8 feet high. The fire it made created flames which leaped 10 feet into the air. Although the part of monk Hagami's body facing the fire felt as if it was burning up, the part of his body away from the fire felt as if it was freezing. Unless you have undergone Shugyo yourself, you cannot understand nor have any right to comment on it. However, it is possible to understand something about monk Hagami's Shugyo. Walking 20 or even 50 miles around the peak of Mount Hai can be done by anyone in good physical condition, but it becomes Shugyo rather than a physical feat because of the attitude with which this activity is undertaken and the grind of doing it every day in addition to your other duties as a monk. When your physical efforts are maximized, while the amount of rest and nutrition you receive is minimized, you cannot continue through physical strength alone. You must draw on your spiritual resources, which grow as a result of being called upon. Another way of looking at it is that we appreciate our health most when we are ill. That is, when we are ill, we have something to compare our health with, and thus our health is experienced as precious. Similarly, we can say that we do not appreciate the sacredness of life as much as we should because we do not have anything to compare it with. Life is something that we have had all our life and therefore take for granted. Can you imagine what it would be like to not have life? The state that differs from life is death, but if we die, we cannot come back to life no matter how much we feel we will appreciate it. Monk Hagami's Shugyo can thus be looked at as a sort of, quote, controlled death, a state which he experienced and which he could compare with the state of life. Please remember, however, that these are only intellectual attempts at trying to understand monk Hagami's Shugyo experience. We cannot gain the same insight from reading about it that we can gain from experiencing Shugyo. The Jodo Shinshu Shugyo. Until Shinran Shonen's time, all monks had to practice a Shugyo similar to what monk Hagami did. But with Shinran Shonen's awakening to the true nature of the causal vow, came the understanding that all Shugyo is contained in it. Because Amida Buddha had undergone all the ascetic practices required when he was Hozo Bosatsu, there is no need for us to undergo them. Monk Hagami is very impressed with Shinran Shonen and the teachings of Jodo Shinshu. He frequently speaks before Jodo Shinshu groups, always remarking that he could never have completed the Kaihogyo austerities through his own effort, and that looking back, he realizes that it was Tariki, or Buddha-centered power, that saw him through. As already mentioned, there is no Shugyo in Jodo Shinshu, because according to doctrine, it is all contained in the Nembutsu. But that only means that there is no special Shugyo, which we have to leave home to practice. The other side of this doctrinal formulation is that we do not have to do anything special because everything that we do is Shugyo. The way we wake up in the morning, can't we get out of bed less grumpily? The way we greet our parents and children, can't we be more cheerful about it? The way we eat breakfast, do we have to rush so? The way we drive to work, the way we work, there is nothing that is not Shugyo for a Jodo Shinshuist. As we practice living a better life, we realize that we can become even better. If it were possible to measure, quote, goodness, if we became better by a value of 1, our ideal of goodness would increase by 2. If we become better by 2, our ideal will increase by 4. Although someone looking at us from the outside may feel that we are becoming a better person, in relation to the constantly increasing ideal in our mind, which always increases much faster than we become better, we realize that we are falling behind or getting worse. This is the Jodo Shinshu sense of, quote, evil that we are always facing. True faith. We have indicated the difficulty of religious practice and the imperfections sensed by those who strive to become better. As we become aware of how much better we can become, and although we do become better, because our standards increase far faster than our attainments, we feel as if we are getting worse. If it stayed that way, we would soon despair of living. We would become very critical of the world and weary of living in it. The famed author of the story Rashomon, which was made into a prize-winning motion picture, Ryokusuke Akutagawa, was a person who reached just that point of view. He committed suicide at the early age of 35, leaving the following note, quote, I am unable to be responsible for the evils of this world. This note expresses the heart of a very sensitive artist. His standards for the world exceeded that of the great majority of us. But it lacks one thing. The thing lacking in Akutagawa's note is the saving grace which understands and accepts his sense of, quote, evilness or imperfection. This is why Amida Buddha's causal vow is so important. Whether it is our sense of evil that leaves us no choice but to accept Amida Buddha's vow to cause our birth in the Pure Land, or whether it is Amida Buddha's causal vow that allows us to see how imperfect and, quote, evil we are, our sense of evil and Amida Buddha's causal vow are related to each other in a way that makes it impossible for them to be separated. You have heard of the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. This is a logical impossibility, of course, for if there was an immovable object, by definition, that means there is nothing that can move it. That is, that there is no irresistible force. Or, if there is an irresistible force, that means there is nothing that can hold it back. That is, that there is no immovable object. Amida Buddha's causal vow can be equated to either the immovable object or to the irresistible force. Regardless of how, quote, evil you are, Amida Buddha's compassionate vow to cause your birth in the Pure Land will overcome it and result in your birth there. Further, it can be said that the greater your awareness of your evil nature, the greater you will experience how compassionate Amida Buddha's causal vow is. Those who do not feel a sense of evil or imperfection in themselves will feel it is their, quote, right to be born in the Pure Land, just as many Christians believe they will go to heaven if they live moral lives. Those who are aware of their, quote, evil nature find it difficult to believe that they will be born in the Pure Land because they are not worthy of it. but being worthy or unworthy has nothing to do with the matter. Regardless of how you evaluate yourself, Amida Buddha is one-sidedly working toward your birth in the Pure Land. This is what that widely quoted but little understood phrase in the Tanisho means. Quote, "Since even the good man will be born in the Pure Land, how much more so will the bad man?" Shan-tao, the fifth patriarch of Jodo Shinshu, said, "Faith has two aspects. First, the firm conviction that we are evil beings ever drowning in a sea of birth and death. Second, the unshakable belief that Amida Buddha's 48 vows welcome and embrace all sentient beings, and that we are certain to be born in his land of bliss." This passage is the fundamental explanation of, quote, faith in Jodo Shinshu. The conviction that we are evil beings is the seemingly irresistible force that comes into contact with the actual immovable object of the causal vow. Drowning in the sea of birth and death is the seemingly immovable object that comes in contact with the actual irresistible force of the causal vow. Regardless of how strong our sense of evil or imperfection, Amida Buddha's vow to cause our birth in the Pure Land is stronger. We cannot experience the strength of the causal vow unless we come in contact with it. Sometimes this contact is through a head-on confrontation, but most often it is a gradual awakening to the reality that we have been enveloped in its power all along, without being aware of it. This is not just playing with words. It is an expression of an experience that all Jodo Shinshuists have gone through. Conclusion. Awakening to what is most important. How many days have there been when you could say, quote, "Today I live fully and have no regrets about it"? Count yourself lucky if you have even one. Isn't your usual feeling, "One of these days, when I get this cleared away, then I will be able to live a fuller life"? This means that you are not living life to the fullest now. The work before you will be with you all your life. Waiting until it is done before living life to its fullest will not work, for that day will never come. Our world today is one in which, no matter how we hurry, we are still late. Let us ask a person who is scurrying by a few questions. Just why are you hurrying about, working as hard as you do? I work in order to eat. But why do you eat? Because I will die if I don't. Then why do you want to live? Well, in order to work. A complete circle has been made in the questioning, and we are back to where we started. Let's try a little different tack. You say you work in order to eat to live, and live to work. Then does that mean if you are just able to eat that you will not die? That is it. That is the most important consideration, how not to die. We are so busy. This is what most of us have forgotten. In Japanese, the characters which mean busy and to forget are both written with the characters meaning heart and to lose, only arranged in a different way. That is what happens to us when we are too busy. We lose our hearts. The problem with us today is that our hearts are asleep regarding that most important matter, how to not die. A sleepy or drunken driver is extremely dangerous, not only to himself, but to those around him. Are you aware that you are driving your body around while asleep, regarding what is most essential? Let us awaken our sleeping heart. Buddha Dharma and the Nembutsu within it show us how to live a full and free life. Let us listen to the Dharma, the teaching, which shows us our true nature and which awakens us to the infinite compassion of Amida Buddha. This booklet was written with the desire to present the Nembutsu teaching within Buddha Dharma as simply as possible. It is our hope that everything essential to understanding the teachings left by Shinran Shonin is contained here. But having read this far, it would be a waste to stop at this point. The important thing is, quote, the mind of faith, or Shinjin, experience of the causal vow. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.